Hey guys, welcome back. So this is our next question from SQL 50 Leetcode. Question number 550, gameplay analysis 4. So here's the question. We have this table called activity with these 4 columns. So we have the player ID, device ID, event date, games played, and these are the data types. And player ID event date is the primary key. So we have a composite key here. This table shows the activity of players of some games. Each row is a record of a player who logged in and played a number of games, possibly 0. Before logging out on some day during some device. So here's the question. Write a solution to report the fraction of players who logged in again on the day after the day they first logged in, rounded to 2 decimal places. So if they logged in on 3-1, we want to see if on 3-2 they had a login. So if they logged in and played the day immediately after their first play. In other words, you need to count the number of players that logged in for at least 2 consecutive days. Okay, so it'll be consecutive days. So let's say if they start playing on 3-1 or 1-1, and we are going to see if they also played on 1-2. So 2 consecutive days, starting from their first login date. Then divide the number by the total number of players. Okay, so let's say if we have 2 players who played on 2 consecutive days, starting from their first play date, then it'll be 2 players who played out of, let's say if you had 10 players, so the fraction will be 2 out of 10. So here's the example input. So we have player ID 1, and this is the device ID. Then we have the event date. So on 3-1 they played 5 games, on 3-2 they played 6 games. So see, on this player ID 1 played on 3-1 and also on 3-2. Player ID 2 only played on 6-25, and then player ID 3 played on 3-2 but did not play on 3-3. So for each one of them, we really want to know like what is their first play date, so like the minimum of these dates. So for example, for player ID 1 it is 1. For player ID 2 it is just 1 date because he only played on 1 day. And then for player ID 3 the minimum date is 3-2 out of 3-2 and 7-3. Okay, so in this example it is only player ID 1 who played immediately after playing their first game. So 3-1 he played, and then 3-2, so 2 consecutive days. Player ID 2 only played on 6-25. Player ID 3 played twice but not on the following day after their first date. So they played on 3-2 but not on 3-3. They played like 2 years later or something. So the fraction would be 1 out of 3. So 1, player ID 1 divided by the total number of players, which is 3. Okay, hope that makes sense. Now I'm going to come back to our SQL Server Management Studio where I've already created the table activity, and we are going to start writing our query here. So first I'm just selecting everything from this table. So you see player ID 1, device ID, event date, games played. Okay, so now let's start writing our query here. So let's select everything from this table again, activity, and I'm gonna give it an alias. I'm just gonna call it A1. Okay, now what I'm trying to do is for each day I really wanna find like the first play date, so the minimum event date. That's what I'm trying to find. For each player I wanna find the first play date. So for player 1 it'll be 3-1, for player 2 6-25, excuse me, and then for player 3 it'll be 3-2. So what I can do for that is I can just do a subquery, and I can join the table with another table where we are getting the minimum date. So to get the minimum date, I am gonna do something like this. I can just do activity again. So here in the subquery, I wanna find the player ID, and then I wanna find the first play date. So event date, I wanna find the minimum date, and then let's just call it min date. And since we are using aggregates here, I'm gonna group by player ID. Okay, so if I run just this section of the code, I'm gonna see the first play date for each player. So player 1 played on 3-1, 2 played on 6-5, and then 3 played on 3-2. So this subquery we are gonna use to find the minimum date for each player. Okay, so let's give it an alias. I'm gonna call it A2. And then I'm just gonna join it on a1.playerID equals a2.playerID. Okay, so I'm just joining a1.playerID with a2, this subquery.playerID. So if I run this now, let me run both together. So now what I'm getting is for each player, for each date I'm getting the minimum date also. So see, for player ID 1 I'm getting minimum date 3-1 and then 3-1 again, and then for player ID 2 I'm getting 625, so I'm getting the minimum date here, and then for player 3 I'm getting minimum date here. So it doesn't matter if you're getting it twice, we just want to get the minimum date next to each row, next to each date. We want to get the minimum date. Okay, so now we have this data. So what I want to do next is I want to see if the date difference between both of them, between the event date and the minimum date, is 1. That would mean that they played immediately after their first play date. Okay, so what I can do for that is let me just select everything from here. I can do date diff. So here I have to provide the interval. So I'm saying date diff between the minimum date, so starting date, minimum date, and the event date. So what is the date diff? So this is the difference. So if I run this now, so here what am I getting here? I'm getting the date difference between the minimum date and the next day. So for first one we see is 3-1 and 3-1 because this row has the same record 3-1 3-1, so it's 0. That's good. We want to exclude that. For this row we are saying, hey, there's a difference of 1, so the event date is 2, but this player also played on 3-1, so this is what we want to count. So this is 1, so this is what we want to include, then 0 0 and then 853. Okay, this is perfect. So this is what we need. And now what we are gonna do is we are gonna count how many players have this. So I'm just gonna do conditional count case when this date difference equals 1, then I want to count a 1, else I want to count a null. End. Okay, so now if I run this, I should see 1. So only one player played immediately after playing their first game. Okay, so we have that. And then what I want to do is I want to divide this by, to get the fraction, I want to divide this by the count of distinct player ID. And what is this? Ambiguous column. Okay, yes. So we have to say, let's say just coming from A1, we can say either one. So this is gonna give you the number of players who played immediately after playing their first game divided by the total number of players. Let me execute this now. We're getting 0 because I think it's we have to, in SQL Server Management Studio, we have to just multiply it by 1.00, so we get it as a decimal. So now we are getting it as a decimal, and then finally we have to round it to 2 decimal places. So I'm going to do round, and this whole thing I'm going to say to 2 decimal places, and then finally we are going to give it a alias, call it fraction. Let me execute it now. Okay, so 0.33, so 1 out of 3, which is 0.33. This is perfect. So I'm just gonna copy my code here. Okay, I'm gonna come back to our Leetcode. I'm gonna paste my solution here, and I'm gonna execute it now, run it now. Ran successfully. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and thank you for watching.